Fuck it.
Fuck it.
Fuck it. We'll do it live.
Doing it live.
We'll do it live.
Fuck it.
Fuck it. We'll do it
All
live.
right.
Tonight on Something Down History Road, we're going to be covering the history of Marvel, Timely, and Atlas Comics.
You doing Hostile Gato?
I am Hostel Jackson.
There's a reference.
I'm
Wait.
Charlie.
Oh, I'm D.
Alright, so what exactly do we know about Marvel Comics?
Well, they make comics, and mostly.
I swear to God, if you start every night with, well, they do this, I'll slap you.
Try it. Anyway. And they
Pass
are,
this on.
they're the reason for, like, I want to say 30 plus mediocre to good movies.
Mediocre.
Mediocre? You mediocre clarinet player.
Mediocre. Well, I mean, it depends on who's asking it. Quentin Tarantino's in The Office, yes, they're just mediocre.
Well, everything up till, I want to say...
Same thing with Scorsese.
Everything up till Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, because you know when she walked in barefoot, that's when Tarantino paid attention.
Shout out to our... we've had this on one of our episodes. Call back.
What, the Tarantino thing?
Yeah. It was on one of them. Call back.
Well, yeah, no, the Tarantino foot thing is just kind of a well-known Hollywood joke at this point.
All right, we got to talk about comics.
Anyway,
People-
stumbling.
Yeah, people might actually care that we're, like, deviating. Because comic nerds are aggressive.
I mean,
They're not worth anything, but they're aggressive.
yeah.
I'm a comic nerd.
And you have threatened to stab everybody.
And have I done it yet?
No.
Exactly.
It's because you don't have a knife.
Fuck you. I'll stab you.
Do you need a knife?
Yes, please.
Could stab you with a pencil.
I can stab you with a finger.
Could.
He killed 3 men.
So, Marvel
With a
Comics. Tell me what you know about Marvel Comics.
They make comics.
So they're responsible for Spooderman,
They are responsible for Spooderman.
Phosphorus Dude, Colonel Mexico.
No, seriously. Like, there are some people who care about Marvel Comics, man.
I
Like,
think there is a Colonel Mexico in the comics, though.
There's a Captain Britain.
I know there's a Captain Britain. He has Excalibur.
I think you're thinking of Marvel Zombies.
there's also a Captain Canada.
There's a Captain Canada.
I know
What's
in
the
the
Russian one?
Ultimate, and the Ultimates, he's Colonel America. I know that.
They have a couple ones. None of them are like Captain
I
Russia
know,
or something.
It's like Shield Russia
Captain
guy.
Russia was the Red Star, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But Marvel Comics, they started technically loosely in 1939 under the pretense of Timely Comics. This was a company derived by Martin Goodman, who changed his name from Mo because he just hated it.
It's a good change.
It's a good change.
It was a good change.
I mean, it
Call
wouldn't be
back.
until a bit later until Mo Howard became a thing, and Mo became a good name.
Well, he was born in 1908 to Jewish immigrants from Lithuania, Russia, one of those two. He was the oldest of 17. And at like 5 years, in like 5th grade, he ended up traveling across the country, getting into different jobs because he'd left school, things like this. And he started basically this, he started working for a publishing and distribution company back in, I believe it's 1929 as a salesman. And then he works his way up and starts his own. It's magazine, mutual magazine, like distribution or something like that. Monthly magazine distribution, something like this. He starts his own company, Mutual Magazine Distributions, and I think it's like 37.
We'll just say MMB for short.
D.
Yes, MMD. Sorry.
God, you're an idiot. He's pretty much just doing like pulp comics. Pulp magazines, which are, as far as I could like find, they're basically just the equivalent of like.
They're like short horror story books, like magazine. Yeah, they usually tend to like pulp magazines usually tended to like publish like short form like horror, some sci-fi.
Yeah,
like,
some of them are just like
exploitation stuff.
Yeah, some of them are that. Some of them are like actual like info and shit like that. Because some of them are like surprisingly, Playboy, before it started getting into nudity and shit like that, was considered a pulp magazine.
Yeah.
So it was like marketed towards
Editorials.
men with the editorials and like, hey man, do you want to impress your women? Go find out about Viagra. Back in 1930, because it was around then.
A lot of people kind of know.
Do you
pulps.
want to stop a boner? Get cornflakes from Dr. Kellogg.
Yeah, no, that's why cornflakes were originally invented.
Well, Dr. Kellogg also was the reason why we circumcised, if I remember.
You actually might be right there.
I believe so.
I think he's the one that.
He also wanted to, from what I remember, I want to say something with the vagina. I'm not.
This is a
totally
sidebar
remember.
I am not willing to go down right now.
Okay.
Not for a comics episode.
Okay.
On a different one, yes. But
Anyway,
1939. So Action Comics does theirs in 1938.
they become DC eventually.
Yeah, and that's how we get Superman. And they start coming out with, because they see how big it sold, they were like, hey, you know, we could do this too. We can get like Bill Everett and a bunch of notable guys at the time, like Jack Kirby, Bill Everett, Stanley Ditko, Steve Ditko. Yeah, all these notable names that I will butcher because I can't pronounce it.
Stanley, Jack Kirby, Steve
I should have the
Ditko.
name Ditko.
And he just starts hiring a bunch of freelancers. But before this, there was these things called packagers, allegedly. This I'm finding out a lot of information from a podcast on Spotify. I will shout them out because they gave me a lot of info, and they reference a book that was written by somebody who I, for the life of me, will butcher the name of. So I'm not going to do that because I want them to actually like be respected and shit. The podcast that I heard it from is Explain This Comics Guys. Check them out. They like broke it down so this way I could understand it, which means you could probably get it, and you could probably get it, and for fuck's sake, I mean, you guys will get it. Like, we're the bottom of the barrel right now. Yeah, with like Spooderman over there.
I try to be the funny.
But yeah, there's these dudes called packagers who basically like just acquire freelance titles and things like this. Like they're how Namor and Human Torch and a couple other guys end up even getting to Marvel. They were the middleman that was like, hey, look, we prepared these things that you want, right?
Oh, for
look
the
at
record,
these.
the Human Torch he's referencing is a different Human Torch.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
The Human Torch that everybody knows from the Fantastic Four doesn't come out until 1961. The Human Torch android, which was developed by a scientist, and because the chemical reacted with the android itself in the atmosphere, he just lit on fire.
Yep.
He couldn't control it. However, he then ended up being able to. So he just went on fire and
Yes.
as soon as he was turned on. And then the scientists turned him off, buried him in plastic in underground, right? And then he turns himself back on, the android, escapes from the plastic and everything, and he learns how to control his flaminess. But, yeah, flaminess.
Scientific
Combustion.
terms.
Hey, man, it's Pride Month.
Anyway. So, but yeah, he actually I think had a kind of a cameo in the first Captain America too.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the showcase. It was like his model or something like that. He was in one of the showcases during when they're showing off a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Marvel Cinematic Universe, which we'll get to on a later episode of this. We're only going to cover up to a certain amount. Marvel is way too fucking big.
Then DC.
Yeah, I mean, we're just doing like a brief history of them becoming Marvel and becoming the juggernauts that they are, and then from there we'll cover it. So that's why we're covering Timely, Atlas, and like up until right around like Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, the 60s era
Yeah.
of Marvel. We're not going to go super deep with that because
When
there's
they
a lot of
actually took
contention.
off.
Yeah, there's also a lot of contention as to like, all right, well, did Stan Lee do this because he was the writer? He was the editor. Did Jack Kirby? Did Steve Ditko? Who created these characters? Because like Is it the writer? Is it
The
artist?
there's a lot of
There's a lot of contention and a lot of bad blood, or at least there was.
because
Rest in peace.
A lot
All
of
of
the
them?
supposedly
Pretty
Stan Lee
much.
would just come up with like a character name, a light outline, and then just give them like a plot and let the artist do a lot of filling.
Yeah, I mean, he
That's
would
the
come up.
rumor.
He would also come up with like a loose storyline, like what he wants for their powers to be, type of a thing. Like,
Yeah.
this guy can shrink down. His name is Ant-Man. Let's go, type shit. Or yeah, he's got the powers of a spider. Spider-Man. Boop.
He
Have fun with
fought
it.
hard for Spider-Man apparently.
Yeah,
Spider-Man, they did not want to start at first, from what I've been told, from what I heard.
yeah.
Like,
So
he was,
So Martin Goodman, the guy that I was talking about earlier, he was just like this shark who had a whole bunch of different like publications and distribution companies and like comic companies that he was publishing and distributing because of course he would. Why wouldn't he be, right?
right.
He's his own cash cow. And so he would have
real estate.
It is free real estate. So he would have all sorts of like little avenues to be like, all right, well, look at this, look at this, look at this. But he comes out with Marvel Comics in
Trademark.
And I want to say it's 1930. It's October of 1939, and it has this fantastic cover of the Human Torch and the original like design for Submariner touching each other, basically what looks like touching each other. And again, it's just a dude on fire, like reaching out to a guy coming out of like a door. And those were the two characters that really took off from Marvel Comics. The
Wait, you
initial,
talk about this one?
yeah,
He's
He's
firing a
firing
gun.
a
at him.
gun. I was
And
gonna
that's-
bring
that's
that
not
up.
Namor.
look, shut the people.
Yeah, I was
We're
gonna say
1080p now, guys.
I was gonna say that one, but then you started saying touching, and I was like, they weren't touching, they
Well,
were shooting.
Human Torch is looking like he's trying to touch.
He looks like the devil.
He does look like he's trying to touch.
Yeah, right.
Maybe
He looks
not
like he's
a
trying to
popular
grab
touch.
somebody shooting at him, but that's clearly not Namor. That's a guy in a green
Shut
shirt.
up, nerd.
And you also said Namor, so I was like,
Shut up, nerd.
all right.
This month, the Human Torch, the Angel, Submariner, and Masked Raider.
Masked Raider was like a Lone Ranger type knockoff because westerns were big.
Oh, yeah.
Western comics were big, and Angel was I think it was Adventure DC, that whole like publishing house, because they also did a similar thing to Marvel and Martin Goodman, or I guess Timely Publications, Timely Comics at the
There's
time.
a few characters named Angel now in comics.
Yeah, so he was a ripoff of Saint, who would go on to be Saint for DC.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
Like
so
a vigilante type character.
yeah, basically.
Yeah. All right.
But
It's
yeah,
kind of similar to Green Hornet.
kind of the original October print only had 80,000 copies, and they all sold out. Which, for never having a comic book out, that's not bad.
Yeah.
So they redid it the exact same for November of '39, and that one did 800,000 copies.
Did they do radio dramas? Because I know Superman was doing radio dramas.
That I don't know about.
I think Captain America might have had one, but I don't.
So Captain America had this awful like propaganda, like bullshit fucking.
Running out and punching Hitler in the face.
Yes, that was 1940.
I think that was his first comic.
That is the that is the first issue of that is
America?
Captain America #1
It's just
for
him
like
punching Hitler on the
1941.
right in the front cover.
I think it's right around when we were just about to enter World War II, like just before we entered.
I could see that, especially considering Stan Lee is Jewish.
Well, he didn't actually have anything to do with it because he was 16 when he started working, and he was just a gopher. He
Okay.
started in 1940. That's it. He started in 1941, and 1942, I think it is, Captain America came out. I don't remember exactly, but Captain America comes out shortly after he gets on. But Stan Lee is just a gopher because he's 16. In 2 years, he ends up working his way towards being a writer and being an editor. Not like editor-in-chief, editor, but an editor. And he was doing, so they had, disgusting. So they had,
Disgusting. Shame.
Martin Goodman, he just loved throwing shit out there and seeing what stuck. He gave it like an issue, maybe two. If it didn't sell, he just moved on to the next thing.
Okay.
And the big two were Human Torch and Namor the Submariner. So they ended up getting their own lines eventually.
So,
Well, they were still part of Marvel Comics, and he ended up coming up with a few others, like I said, like Angel was a knockoff. The Wizard was another big one that stuck.
the wizard?
The Wizard.
The wizard.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. What does he do?
He whizzes.
Okay.
I do not know specifics as to that.
I'm going to Google this guy.
Yeah, I do not know specifics to that. You can find out on your own and then tell me. Because I want to know what he does, so this is your homework and your homework.
Wizard Frank Robert. Okay, what does he do? Comic book character.
Yeah. Kazar ends up getting launched under Timely Publications, and he basically just took... He's a Tarzan knockoff, Kazar.
Okay.
When he is initially published, like first run, he is 100% just a Tarzan knockoff. No dinosaurs, no Savage Lands, no none of it. That ends up like being Conan and, you know, all this fun shit. No, he is just Tarzan. And he started off in the pulp comics, the pulp magazines with that, and then because he was like their number one pulp magazine, he's going to explain it to us. But because he was like one of their number one pulp magazines, Martin was just like, here you go, artist, make this into a comic. And they just copied the fucking stories. What's the Wizard?
So,
Come on.
his scientist dad injects him with mongoose blood. Yeah, fucking mongoose blood. Wait, okay.
Come on, out with it.
Okay, first he was bitten by a cobra, and then a mongoose appeared and killed the cobra. So he injected his son with the mongoose blood, and it reacted strangely with his mutant physiology, which gave him the ability to move at superhuman speed.
See, he whizzes.
He whizzes by.
All right, I can see the name now.
And he looks like a flash knock, like a flash knock over the big W on his chest.
So yeah, they end up stealing a bunch of DC Action Comics, Adventure Comics. They end up stealing a bunch of like designs that are doing well for them, and are like, well, yeah, I mean they're making money over there. Why wouldn't they make money for us? Let's just make our own, right? Makes sense.
He could only run at 100 miles per hour before becoming fatigued.
Hey, tell me how many miles per hour you can run.
Super urine production. It literally says it right here. He produces copious amounts of urine, which he uses to spray down enemies and fires.
The Wizard, people.
That's actually in the wiki.
The Wizard, people.
And he
One of Marvel's greatest heroes in the 40s.
I
He went
mean,
into the
if you
modern
came
era,
at
my
me
dude.
at 100 miles an hour and whizzed on me, I'd stop doing whatever the fuck I was doing.
So Stanley,
World domination? Nah, that guy peed on me.
just got fire hosed at 100 miles an hour with this. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. Wait, is he quickly it now?
no,
Or is he just waiting for us to stop?
yes.
I'm sorry, that just sometimes you just end up seeing something so ridiculous, you just gotta.
We got all the laughs out. I just gotta get all the laughs out.
Get the laughs out.
For now.
All right, so
Yeah, I get that reference. Family Guy. Reference to the references.
So Stanley, like I said, he Captain America comes out in 1941. They are just Jack Kirby and the guy that he was working with. They're just looking to, because they're both Jewish. They're just looking to come out with like this next big hit, this patriotic superhero. He comes out in 1941 as America's like starting to be like, oh shit, Hitler bad. Let's not be friends with that guy. Meanwhile, like all the Jews in America are like, no fucking shit, Sherlock. So
Yet we still sent a few boatloads of them back too.
So, different story. Different story. So, they end up coming up with Captain America. And he has his super iconic, American flag, his shield, and he's punching Hitler in the face. That is the first image, the first comic that you will ever see with him. Well, maybe not the first comic you'll see, but like, that is the first comic that they saw in 1941.
Superman was a very similar story too, because I think Superman, his creator was Jewish and also came up with like a very Ubermensch character to
I'm like 80% sure most creators were Jewish.
comic book creators, yes.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of them are from Manhattan, and they all have ties to each other.
Long nose tribe.
So, fun fact about this, he actually had Martin Goodman actually had an office for Marvel well, technically it was like Atlas at the time and Timely at the time, for a little over a decade in the Empire State Building.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it turns out he was actually doing pretty well because Namor, Human Torch, Captain America, when it came out, they all like fucking blew up for them.
Interesting note about Namor, but he's technically Marvel's first mutant.
Yes, in terms of the first published mutant.
He was like the first character that's with the designation though for mutant. I think Apocalypse is considered the first one chronologically though in universe, depending on which universe you're at, and a few other characters.
Yeah, it also depends on what your definition of is.
I mean, I think technically even
'Cause there's-
Spider-Man counts as a mutant. Like the Sentinels consider him a mutant.
Well,
Yes. So the spider bite mutated his normal DNA. So mutant.
wouldn't that make him
However,
more of a mutate though, like Deadpool?
He would be a mutant. Well, I think Deadpool was technically naturally.
he had some mutant in him that got like accelerated depending on again which storyline we go with, comics versus fucking movies
yeah.
and too much shit.
Although it seems though that a lot of the comics tend to kind of start parodying what the movies go with.
But yes, it depends. Like
Some of the stuff. Some of the stuff.
which universe are we talking about? Earth specifically? Are we talking about XYZ? Because like
I think technically the Inhumans would be whatever.
yeah,
The
like I said,
Eternals.
it
Yeah, whatever.
really depends on what you're talking about. Because Thanos is just he is a eternal with a mutant deviant gene. Because
Yes.
so like he outlasts fucking Apocalypse. He's older than Apocalypse. It's just a matter of like, what are you going by?
Apocalypse. Oh, the character. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry. Because I'm thinking of Apocalypse, the planet from DC for a second.
the planet, my son, or me.
Yes.
Nobody likes the Spartans.
Shout out to TBZ.
Hey.
Literally last
You can
episode.
use whales on them.
But yeah.
Whales!
But yeah, Stanley Lieberman.
Lieberman.
Yeah, he's cousin to
His wife is the cousin.
not his wife is the cousin.
Oh, he's
He is the cousin to Martin Goodman's wife.
Yeah. Sorry.
And so that's how he ends up getting the job at the age of 16. He's like I said, he starts off as a gopher, works his way up. He's writing stories in the back of Captain America because fun fact about comics during this time, they get treated differently than magazines do for postage. So in order to ship things out cheaper, they had two blank pages, well not blank, but they had 2 pages that were strict writing, no art, in order to be classified as a magazine and not a comic.
A lot of them also would have multiple, like, it would be like the comic, and there'd be like small. Like, I think Captain America had like 3 other different separate comics in it too. Like that one. Like, I think, for example, and then like.
Well, that was again part of like Martin Goodman's whole like throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Well, I meant like there's like you could get like this like you would have like the Captain America, and then you'd also have like 2 other different comics in that same like physical issue.
So that was like a lot of the Marvel comics and the
DC did it too, I think.
yeah. So there's a lot of like compilation style comics out at this time just to get characters out, see what sticks, see who is deserving of their own. Because like Superman gets his own, Batman and Robin get their own,
Well,
Wonder Woman gets her own.
Well, Superman started as Action Comics.
Again, yeah, that's what I mean. He, like, it really depends on like what you're trying to go with, because Marvel Comics #1 started with 4 different superheroes,
Yeah.
4 different fucking stories in it.
We already said that, as we pointed out before.
Yeah.
Submariner, Human Torch, and
Submariner, yep.
Mariner. The guy who keeps trying to get with Sue Storm.
That's later on in life, but yes.
It's later in life.
But it is one of his defining characteristics.
All right, we're
Jumping around a lot.
we're tangenting.
Sorry, it's stumbling. That's what we do.
It's a word.
Yes, it sure is a word. I will take my nickel back, please.
I thought it was a quarter.
It's Canada. It's not real.
I thought Australia wasn't real.
No, Australia is real. It's just on the opposite side of the disc.
Canada.
Which, as we know, is on top of 4 elephants, which is on top of a turtle.
Yep. But you know what? Fuck it. You're French. Have it.
Wow, the rednecks of the French.
The rednecks of the French.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I'm still disappointed you never let me do my French character in D&D.
I never stopped you.
Yes, you did. You said we are not having a mime character because I'm not.
It was also the first time some people were playing. They should not have fucking had to deal with somebody literally not talking during a fucking D&D campaign.
No,
We're not. No, you can tell them after.
Fine.
I know you guys play D&D.
Yes.
So
we tried.
Stan, the man,
man.
ends up getting this name later. He ends up getting drafted for the war. So,
Huh.
yeah.
What is it good for?
Do you mind?
I think he wants you to slap me again.
So, when he gets drafted, they find out that he's a writer, and they put him in an office for publications and like putting out propaganda and shit like this. He ends up working with famous director Frank, not Francis Ford Coppola, but like Francis Capetta or something like that. Another one of the 40s era, 50s era, who ends up becoming famous. He works with Dr. Seuss.
It's actually supposed to be pronounced Zeiss. Believe it or not.
I can't pronounce his real name. It's Tim something.
Who cares? It's Zeiss.
And no, I'm not talking. He takes on a totally different pen name for
Dr.
Dr. Seuss. His
Well,
real name is like
Yeah,
Tim something with a P.
Yeah, the guy, Dr.
But-
Seuss is, his real name is something, but he actually says in one of his books it's supposed to be pronounced as Zeiss, not Zeus.
And another famous comic guy.
It's weird.
And another famous comic guy who starts doing work with Archie Comics, I believe it is. But
That's a whole, we should do an Archie episode, because that'd be an interesting tangent to go down.
yeah. But during this time, he's still like getting letters in from Timely in order to do the storyboarding, the writing for these comics, because they just like his work. They're selling.
Imagine
So every week or every month, however long it was, he was getting in his fucking mail and writing all weekend, writing all night or whatever, in order to send it back out while he's in the fucking army.
I have to wonder if he requested to do any combat duty just to actually get a chance to shoot some Nazis. I mean, as a Jewish guy, I would take the chance.
I mean, yeah, but he was also still pretty young. I don't think he wanted to die.
Fair.
So,
It's weird how we're actually going to get a chance to do that now sooner or later anyway.
yeah, he has weird beliefs. You can ignore him.
Okay.
So-
Anyway.
During this time, like I said, he's writing a whole bunch, and Jack Kirby and Martin Goodman, they get into a fight. Jack drops from Marvel. He only was able to do 10 issues of the original run for Captain America, so there's only 10 initial Captain Americas by Jack Kirby and the other guy that was helping to write it. I don't know it. I
Ditko?
should. No, it's not Ditko.
Okay.
Ditko comes in later during like Atlas times.
Oh yeah. He's a later edition.
Yeah. And with this, eventually he makes his way back towards Marvel because he jumps ship on and off like 5 or 6 times, right? He's notorious for.
I think he.
He is notorious for not doing well with publishers and writers and things of that nature.
So wait. Which one was the one that jumped ship to go to DC for a little bit and ended up doing?
Jack Kirby.
I was gonna say he ended up doing the New Gods. Was that Kirby or was that
I don't know if it was Kirby specifically, but I know that Jack Kirby ended up going from one to the other to a lot. Like he ended up going from Marvel to DC and things like this a couple times.
Stumbling Down History Road? Subscribe.
There's people outside.
There's people outside.
It's cool. So, because of this, it turns out that Jack Kirby thought that Stan Lee. So, remember the packagers?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Going back to the packagers.
yeah, Martin basically had the brilliant idea of why would I pay a middleman? He's not wrong.
No.
So the stuff that he had purchased from the packagers, he had to stick with because they signed a contract. He had the deals through those guys. They had the rights, and then he was just hiring freelancers at a cheaper rate than hiring the packager and paying them. But it was still better than what the packager was paying the freelancers, the artist and the writers. So, in order to just acquire the titles to acquire the whole like Human Torch and Namor like license period, it was like we'll just be horrible customers, and then they'll just not want to deal with us, and they'll just allow us to buy it out.
And that's how business works.
Yeah. Turns out Martin Goodman, really good at being kind of a shitbag to people. Really smart about it businessly. He didn't give a fuck about comics. He just wanted the money.
It's
Like,
almost like
straight
people
up.
in corporate power tend to be kind of sociopaths.
We're not talking about that right now.
Boy, howdy, our fucking...
Minimum Wage podcast was the other week. Shout out. But
Time is nebulous. It was sometime up in the past.
if you're watching this in the future, why? But also, you may have seen this before you saw our Minimum Wage podcast, so go forward to watch us in the past? I don't know. Fuck it. But,
Oh, I just realized
Yeah,
I
so-
forgot to switch my shirts for the podcast.
so that's why, yeah. So that's why Jack Kirby and the other guys were like, yo, I don't really like the deal that we have with Marvel right now. Let's go talk to DC. Let's go talk to Adventure Comics, Action Comics, and be like, hey, can we get a better deal with you guys? We'll
If
just come
they're-
on as writing staffs.
If there's one thing that both kills and brings comics to life, it's the rights. And who has them?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why it took forever for Spooderman to get into the movies.
Well, the Marvel movies, the Marvel Disney universe. It's also why there was such a contention over like Shazam, Captain Marvel.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was huge. That's famous. And Shazam outsold Superman for a long time until he kind of didn't.
What was the thing with it was because he was a copycat, right? It was too
So-
similar, right? Or something
So Shazam was initially Captain Marvel
Yeah.
under Wiz Comics.
But Marvel wanted Captain Marvel themselves because Marvel. And I think they
And-
had their own character.
And there was a character named
Yeah.
Marvel.
Yeah. Who they made to fuck with DC, who had then purchased the rights to Wiz, because DC ends up actually like DC and Marvel end up owning like 80% of media at some point in terms of comics, because they pick up Charleston, they pick up Atlas, they pick up, which is technically timely.
Valiant and stuff, I think now is DC.
Yeah. They pick up
The
Wiz
one-
Comics, they just assimilate like Adventure Comics and Action Comics and
The
DC.
publishing holder
and-
that Stack Shock is from.
yeah, it's nuts. Who like actually owns what and where they came from. And
yeah.
it's also super famous that like a lot of comic book publishers and a lot of distributors, they own the rights to the character, not the guy that creates them.
Yeah.
Which is why this is totally tangential to where we're at. But this is why McFarlane,
With Image Comics.
Yeah, the Image
Todd
Comics,
McFarlane,
yeah.
has a huge fallout with Marvel and ends up creating Image Comics, or what was for a little bit known basically as like McFarlane Comics,
Yeah.
because he wanted his rights to what he deemed his characters.
He also wanted to publish more edgy and like harder core content too, compared to what he could get away with in, like, say, Marvel and DC.
And I would argue Spawn is one of the most badass comic characters.
Oh yeah, he's.
You can tell that it's a product of its era, though. Like this was 100% like '90s edgelord. How many spikes and
I love that we went full circle back again to the '90s with that comic publishing company that just came out trying to be like, you know, more edgy and anti-woke. Oh fuck! What is their names? They did the whole Kickstarter
We're not.
thing.
No.
I have no idea what you're even talking
I'm
about.
not
We're talking about the '40s.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Back to where we were.
So
Sorry. Time's a flat circle.
yeah. So sales start to drop on superhero comics, and they start going towards more of the line of sci-fi, horror, fantasy. Well, less so fantasy, but like more along the lines of like sci-fi, horror, crime, true tales. This really starts being a big issue in 47 and into like 51. There's a fantastic thing. We'll cover it in its
I
own
think that was the
separate.
Bronze Age. They consider that. No, Silver Age.
No. So Golden Age gets its own title in 1951, and it's referenced on a Marvel comic, or I guess at the time it's Atlas comic, where they're talking about, it literally references it on the cover, and it calls back to he's not your Golden Age hero. It 100% references that.
Such a corny line.
So they were trying. Okay, I see what they're doing.
Yeah.
That
So
makes
they
sense.
then turn it into the Silver Age, which lasts for a good number of years.
Where it also has the most ridiculous stories.
Some of them, yeah. But we'll get into it. EC, Education Comics, Entertainment Comics, they have this huge thing that affects Marvel and DC. Well, not Marvel at the time. It's Atlas at the time. But they just have this huge, like, presence, and their sales are so dominant and so just impactful on the business as a whole, because it's what really drives like the whole horror, western, sci-fi, like true crime stories, because they're taking literal like horror book adaptations from the 20s and just turning it into a comic, kind of like Kazar was. Like it really is almost Mystery Science Theater 3000. Like some of those fucking like, oh, look at this. There's an astronaut, but the astronaut's an ant. Like full on like Twilight Zone levels shit, like early Twilight Zone levels shit.
They get weird.
It's awesome. I love their weird science shit, and it's some of the funniest shit that you will ever find. I mean seriously, their horror stuff.
Is your background fucking Rick?
Yes.
Basic.
Get the
bitch.
fuck off my podcast.
A basic ass bitch.
It's okay. We don't have a 300 level IQ.
Yeah, to be fair, you have to have a high IQ to.
So
And my other is Broly.
Okay, that one's acceptable.
Shout out. But Atlas Comics, they ended up doing a bunch of horror and a whole bunch of crime and sci-fi in order to try and keep up to date with the times. Stan Lee comes back as an editor-in-chief, and he just hires a whole bunch of like books and books and books. Atlas is doing so poorly because it's Atlas at the time that they end up having to get out of the Empire State Building. They end up having to shut down the distribution and basically like the main distribution and just turn into comics, because that's the only thing really selling for them. Still some pulp magazine, but like they can't do they can't do wholesale distributing anymore, and they can't publish their own shit anymore. They can just like, all right, guys, we have these things and we're sending them out. They go to DC in, I think it's 57, and they cut a deal with them to actually be distributed through DC at the time. Yeah. That's how poorly they did. I'm going to call back to EC. This is all a fallout of what happens with entertainment comics and education comics, but it turns into entertainment comics when William Gaines takes over. I love EC comics, not DC, Detective Comics, EC. So in 54, William Gaines goes on trial to the Senate because there's these studies that come out about, like, oh, look, comics are just lowbrow intelligence. They're teaching people to be moral, this, that, this, and the next thing. There's a dude.
Yeah, that's why they ended up bringing,
dude.
like, Batwoman and shit.
There's a dude, Batwoman's later. There's a dude, William Frankworth. Franklin. Something. Is
Franklin.
So it's Franklin Wortham. That's what it is. Franklin Wortham, I believe. And he ends up creating this, like, theory that, as it turns out, because there's so much crime, and you can see a direct correlation between crime rate going up, and he lives in New York, and there's so much crime in New York because he wasn't used to this, it has to be coming from somewhere. Something is teaching the kids to be this way. It has to be the comic books, because look at how popular they are. Look at all of these, like, no. The cover
Time is a flat circle.
the cover of, like, the most famous one that they put up during the Senate trial with William Gaines is a dude holding a chick's head that was cut off, and it's all bloody and shit, and he's holding a machete, and it's just the silhouette of it. And the senator asks him, do you find this to be in good context? And William Gaines is like, well, I mean, it's in good context for a horror comic, but what if for, like, the kids? Like, anybody can see this. And then he kind of flubbers out, and that's why the fallout of that ends up being
If
the
you just pay
juvenile
attention to what your
delinquency,
kids-
the Juvenile Delinquency Association or something like this. They basically turn all the publishers and all the distributors, so Atlas and DC and Wiz, and
Essentially,
Charleston.
it's like the ERB
This
for gaming.
is how the Comics Code Authority comes to be.
Yeah. That's why I'm laughing, because it's so similar to
Yeah.
video games.
Yes.
Time is a flat circle.
Yes, thank you. Don't hug me. I'm scared. So,
We could be creative together.
green is not a creative
creative
color.
Oh, didn't they get a Netflix thing recently?
Yes, they actually have a whole Netflix series. Dude, there's lore, like deep lore to this shit.
I haven't even seen the Netflix thing. I've only seen the YouTube stuff.
Dude, the YouTube stuff has deep lore to it. Like, it's ridiculous. Anyway,
But yeah,
stumbling.
that's why I was laughing, because
Yeah,
it's
I
so
know.
similar to
I'm
the,
aware. There's a reason why I did it. I mean, pretty much any time that you can come up with a, oh no, think of the kids,
I mean, hell, they did it with metal music.
They did do it with
witchcraft, metal, fucking
D&D,
music videos, TV,
Pokemon.
D&D, Pokemon, MTG, fucking literally anything that's like, oh no,
Ninja Turtles.
oh no, kids like this and bad things happen. Can we detect any sort of little itty bitty thing that is bad? They're not G.I. Joe. Bah!
Side tangent. Do you know what the Ninja Turtles were in
In
England?
England? Yeah. Hero Turtles.
Yep.
Because they can't be ninjas.
Turtle Heroes.
They changed the
Heroes in a
nunchucks
half
to
shell?
grappling hook.
Yep.
Yep.
So, I was talking about William Gaines and the Comics Code Authority.
Yes.
So, in order to prevent the government from actually, like, stepping in and creating
The
its
comics did it themselves, yeah.
its own thing, the comics got third-party guys to basically go in and just look at this. Does this feature the moral code? There's like 100+ pages of things that you can find online of different iterations of it, because it undergoes
Exactly
3
like the ERB.
ESRB. Yeah,
Exactly the same fucking thing.
Or the MMPA, the one that does movie ratings too.
yeah. Like, that's what I mean.
Like I think a PG-13 would be like a hard R now is like a PG-13 back then or some shit and everything. Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, but
What was the first movie?
Well-
I used to remember what was the first movie was PG-13 rated. They made it specifically for one movie. I'm trying to remember what it was.
so I'm going to get back onto my point.
Sorry.
And then when you remember it, i.e., Google it, you'll let me know. The Comics Code Authority, like I said, you can find it all online, the different iterations of it. Has like 100+ pages of just what is and isn't allowed. You have to be respectful to children. You have to be respectful to the parents. You have to be respectful to teachers. You have to be respectful to police, the government. You have to be patriotic. You can't mention horror. You can't mention crime. You can't mention monsters. And then later on, it starts to iterate. So it basically, what's up?
Obviously, it's changed a little bit.
So it basically shut off EC and what they were. And it was specifically for comics, though. So they started to do this little thing where they were like, oh, look, we're a magazine. And then they eventually turned into Mad Magazine. We'll get into EC Comics on a different episode. I
Red
love
Dawn.
talking about this. What's up?
It was Red Dawn.
It was Red Dawn, wasn't it?
Yes, and Gremlins and Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade.
I think they're making a new
1984.
Gremlins movie.
I'm okay. No, they're doing a Netflix
Is it
series.
Netflix? Okay.
I don't know if they're making a movie, but I know they just came out with a Netflix
I don't know.
series.
I was scrolling and I saw Gremlins.
It's supposed to be in ancient China and show what the Mogwai came from.
the Mogwai.
Which, believe it or not, there's actually a novel expansion that explains where they are from.
The Gremlins have a comic. Because
I believe
almost
it.
everything has a comic.
I believe it.
I think it might have been it was either the comics or a novel, but one of it explains where the Mogwai come from, and they were just an alien experiment, and the sun thing is like an allergy that was accidentally bred into them by accident. Like it was literally just a messed up alien experiment. Like go figure. But supposedly there's other origins, but that's one that was like, but anyway, stumbling.
Yeah. So, like I said, Atlas, they're doing horrible during this time because
Horrible.
yeah. So they're doing horrible at this time. Martin Goodman ends up firing pretty much everybody. I mean, everybody other than Stan Lee is pretty much gone.
Gonzo done.
And he goes down to the office one day to be like, hey, everybody's gone other than you. You have to help me out with this still. You're still my editor-in-chief. You're basically number 2. He opens up a closet, and he finds just drawers and drawers and drawers of fucking... Again, this is all info that I found out through this podcast, which, again, I will shout out because they fucking saved me on this. They fucking... They're great. They explain things that I could understand, which means you can understand it. And they reference who they found out a lot of this info for because it's very well documented, and I am doing it no justice.
I think you're doing a little bit of justice.
We're having fun.
It's the Explain This Comics Guys podcast. I found them on Spotify. They're probably on iTunes and everything else.
I need to make
Whatever.
a Spotify account eventually.
But they... he just opens up the closet and he looks, and there's drawers of all sorts of different comics and ideas from times that just didn't get published because they couldn't make the code, because they couldn't do this, or the guys just needed some extra money. So Stanley was like, all right, yeah, let's, show me what you got. I'll buy what I can off of you type of a thing. He was a very, cool guy back then.
Here's $10. Give me the
Seemed
rights.
like a cool guy.
Yeah. He was a little bit of a shrewd as to, who owned the rights to things and, no, you don't have the ability to take this guy with you type of shit. He was still very much a smart businessman.
Yeah.
And true that way. But he was
like it's in his
he-
bloodline.
he was willing to work with people and help them out so long as he enjoyed you type of a thing. And so Martin just is like, all right, clear this out. This is all we're publishing. We can't afford to buy new shit. In 1960 or early 61, late 60, early 61, we get the first Justice League of America. We've had the Justice Society of America. That does okay. But superheroes are pretty much the only thing that you're allowed to sell. Unless it's, magazine form and not a comic. And so DC pretty much just, has everything because they're pretty much the only guys coming out with new shit. And Marvel, kind of, they take over as Marvel Comics in 1961, but Atlas, Marvel, they're releasing things that were bought from like 10 years ago and 5 years ago. So they're releasing old stuff that like doesn't keep up with the times. So again, this is where I learned this info from. They said one version of it, like the story is very well documented, but there's some like, all right, was it a this or a this? Martin Goodman meets with one of the lead distributors for DC for either lunch or a game of golf. And
Probably both.
And he talks with him about how, well, he's gloating to Martin about how well the distribution is going for Justice League of America because it's the first full-on collaborative. They've had, like, the Justice Society of America, and they've had, you know, Human Torch fights Submariner and this and that and other, like, collaborative eras, which, by the way, Marvel, during Timely Comics, is the first guys to have a full-on, like, combined universe. They beat out Superman and Batman to put Human Torch and Submariner to fight against each other. So Marvel wins in that regard, to having the first combined universe.
Fair.
But it was always like, all right, you do the Human Torch because this is your guy. I'm going to do the Submariner because this is my guy. And then we'll, like, meet up at the beginning and meet up at the end to, you know, start it out and end it. And you're just going to take care of yours. I'm going to take care of mine. That's how it is with Justice Society. That's how it is with Human Torch and Namor. That's how it is with all sorts of things. Like, was doing this combination. The World's Best, which is Superman and Batman and Robin all, you know, holding hands. There's a pretty famous meme about, like, Batman should slap the shit out of Superman because Superman's standing on a edge of a riverbank, holding a tree, holding Batman, and Batman's on a log trying to save a girl in the middle of a river. Like, that's World's Best. Like, that's how hokey this shit is.
World's greatest detectives.
Yeah, like, that's how hokey this shit is. And
Superman, which is... Well, I mean, I think to be fair, a lot of early Superman, he couldn't technically fly. He could only just jump really far and high. Yeah. It was just really strong and not, like, OP-powered bullshit.
Yeah. But, yeah, so he's gloating about this, the Justice League, and how well it is. And Martin's just like, fuck this. Fuck this. Stanley, I need you to get a hold of all of the guys who you can. We're creating our own team. This is how the Fantastic Four is formed. And they kind of just like, again, I'm stealing a lot of this from these guys from the podcast.
First family.
They are basically kind of like almost treated as like monster villains because the Thing, he is a fucking, if you ever look back in the old,
monster?
he's basically just a rock monster.
Rock monster.
The Human Torch is literally just a copy of a previous character, the Human Torch, except he can't control it. And like, oh, look, what happens to the guys who are around him who are on fire? You can't, like, put that shit out. Like, it's very much treated almost like a horror comic.
I like how you were essentially saying that Fantastic Four was just created as spite.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like,
100%.
Big dick move, just right there. Bam.
100%. Stan Lee did a lot of the writing. Jack Kirby came back because he needed money. He wasn't getting hired by DC at the time, although he was before, but now he's not because he was working for Atlas, and then they had to let go of people from Atlas, and so freelancing with Steve Ditko comes back. Like, it's 3 people plus Stan Lee, 4 people plus Stan Lee working on this, and it's a fantastic cover if you get the chance for Fantastic Four #1. It's like this green monster coming out from underground. Human Torches flying around, shooting fire blast at it. The Thing is standing in a corner, flipping a car over to try and throw it at it. And Mr. Fantastic is tied up, and he's trying to, like, use his rubber appendages to untie himself, and he's all sorts of, like, jumbled up. So people didn't really know what to expect.
Wait.
because
Yep, that's an interesting.
yeah, show the camera.
Show on the camera.
As good as we can. I'll learn how to put it up on the big screen somehow. That one, maybe. Maybe here.
What are we doing on our movie channel?
Shut up. We will have our own Mystery Science Theater 3000. Totally not a ripoff. One day.
Okie dokie.
But yeah, that ends up being Marvel Comics because the Marvel
November
publication,
1st.
the Marvel publication has always sold well. This is where we get into the Marvel era, and where we get like Tales to Astonish. Well, this was actually technically during like. So Tales to Astonish and like Journey into Mystery and Amazing Fantasy and things like this, where we get a lot of our famous superheroes. Tales of Suspense, Tales of Strange Tales, Tales to Astonish. All these wonderful characters that just come out of these. They end up being basically a product of the 50s, like the late 50s, just sci-fi-esque type things paired up with the 60s innovation of later on, because it's like, all right, well, Journey into Mystery 83, that's our first Thor. Amazing Fantasy 15, that's our first 14? Amazing Fantasy 14 is our first Spider-Man. We have Tales of Suspense 52, I believe it is the first Iron Man. Like, we have all these fantastic characters to come from the just culmination, these weird like sci-fi and fantasy and horror style comics. We pretty much get a good 90% of the main roster from that. We get the new Black Widow because she actually came out in a comic in the 40s, but it wasn't
Black Widow.
Natasha. It was a different Black Widow. She was a femme fatale.
That happens a few times in comics, it seems.
Yeah. They definitely 100% repurpose things. Like the fact that Red Skull is 100% a Captain America villain. He wasn't, like, not. But he starts off being just a super bad, mean corporate businessman who ends up being turning into a communist, who ends up turning into Hydra.
Did you ever see the full page for the Joker getting pissed off at the Red Skull thing? Because in the full page, it actually starts out with the Red Skull like just straight up complimenting and like talking about how like great Joker would be at actually being like a Nazi and how Hitler would love him and shit. And then Joker's like, wait, what? So like the Red Skull is just straight up complimenting and saying the Joker's like awesome, and the Joker's like, fuck you, you're a Nazi.
Yeah, so that's like during one of the first times where we have a crossover between them.
Although I prefer the amalgams. The amalgams are bloody great.
Yeah. So
Have you seen the amalgam stuff?
I don't think so.
Oh my lord.
pretty much the 60s is the
I'll tell you
era
about that later.
is the era of Marvel, because sure, DC was still coming out with some guys, but it was nowhere near as good as Marvel. Like, you still have ties and stories that are unfinished from the 60s coming up today, like the animosity between Ben Grimm and Reed Richards, just because Reed Richards' mainline universe, not Ultimates is a dick.
Oh man, Reed Richards in the fuck Ultimate Universe is a fuck.
He still holds a lot of guilt and a lot of like this pressure to fix Ben and save Ben, because he's the guy that ruined his life for however many years. I mean, he turned him into a monster. He was his best friend. He was the guy that he brought up to be the pilot. He like, this is my guy. This is who I'm, fucking shooting everything with, Sue Storm is his love interest, and she ends up just turning invisible because she's a woman. But she ends up
gets
later.
more powers later.
She does get more powers
Yes.
later.
It's the 50s and the 60s. Men are still pigs. We're
I think
still
she
pigs
ends
now.
up getting kind of broken later on.
Yes and no. It really depends on who's the writer. Because sometimes she has such control over what's inside the force field that she can like remove any and all oxygen. She can just put it in your lungs. She can like, her force fields.
She can explode your head.
Yeah, her force fields are kind of stupid.
Yeah,
Especially, again, depending on who's writing.
Yeah.
I love taking silly powers and breaking them. That's so much fun. Anyway,
And Johnny Storm, the new Human Torch.
he goes
That's
supernova.
the kid. That's the kid brother to the love of his life. This weird like animosity of like, I love her, but she doesn't love me. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I am. Especially when it's the early Fantastic Four, and it's just it really does turn into Marvel's game to lose. I mean, it sold so well, and it was just unlike anything else at the time.
And then Spider-Man comes out and does bloody gangbusters.
Yes, but that is 69, I believe.
Nice.
We'll get into the Marvel era up until like the modern era on a later episode. I think this is a good part for us to leave it. Anyone have any finishing comments?
Let's see.
Like, subscribe, comment if you enjoyed this. If you didn't, I don't blame you.
I was trying to come up with any final thoughts, like just kind of tangentially going on with this. Thought I had something, but it's kind of gone now. But
Just remembered an old TV show of the Fantastic Four.
oh, they had a lot of.
And it was just Magneto's in it.
Okay.
And he's trying to.
he pulls out the wooden gun.
Reed Richards has a gun, and Magneto's like, I'm the master of magnetism.
He
And he
can't.
can't stop the gun. And he's like, how?
So he just gives up.
Stops. Stupid.
They
But I love
did a
it.
lot.
So, as I said earlier when I was talking about Captain America, there is a lot of like horrible TV and movie adaptations up until Iron Man. Well, I'll give it Blade, and then everything past that's good.
I mean,
You talk about movies?
Well, adaptations.
forgetting, like, the
Hulk is
whole-
good.
you're forgetting the '90s,
Like
like
the TV
Spider-Man
show.
and stuff.
Sure, I guess we have.
Spider-Man had
Like the '90s
I want to say like
Spider-Man
but it's
cartoon
five
was straight-
TV shows.
But it's still
Oh, yeah.
hokey and like cheesy. Same thing with the X-Men TV
Don't
show.
forget Japanese Spider-Man.
That's one of the ones I'm counting.
But yeah, like that's all hokey and cheesy up until it gets like, wow, this is something that like is not just for kids.
Like you would know over me, but so we had the Spider-Man from the 90s that we grew up with.
Believe it or not.
But the one beforehand,
I don't know anything from the 90s. I didn't do an entire DBZ podcast with you. Shut up.
but there was one before that I want to say was the 70s.
There's
one
a
that's
couple
always
cartoons.
Yeah, so that was Spider-Man and the Electric Company.
And then there's Spider-Man and his Fantastic Friends or whatever, which was
Yeah.
him with Iceman and
Spider
Fire Girl or something like that.
Was it Fire Girl?
I think it was like fire. It was a fire guy and it was an ice guy,
We will,
Iceman. And
we will get into what we need to with the Marvel era and how they ended up basically being the dominant force in comics.
Yeah.
I mean, Japanese Spider-Man is indirectly responsible for Power Rangers. Yeah, that's a whole side. The Spider-Man, like the character Spider-Man himself, is indirectly responsible for the Power Rangers through just.
We will get into this. We can have our own like Spider-Man episode, our own Daredevil episode. We will cover this. We will cover it all. Closing thoughts. Check us out on other things. By other things, I mean still YouTube, just other episodes.
We have an Instagram.
We do have an Instagram.
We have two Instagrams technically.
You have an Instagram. I have
backup.
Instagrams? I only
Well-
know of the one.
He has one.
Oh.
I'm stumbling down history, just that, not History Road, and
Ah.
I'm just kind of the backup that he tags me in, just in case.
What's your closing thought? Do you feel like you learned today?
I definitely learned a lot. A lot more than I knew.
The fall of Constantinople eventually led to hentai.
But essentially, most of the comics I know is current era.
Good night, people.
Good night.